Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our Football Friday program on radio.com. We'll be joined by WFAN at 6 o'clock. So we have finally made it to our football weekend, our final one of the season, as we get ready for all the action. Super Bowl 54. Looks like there could be some rain, especially a little north of the game on Saturday, but it looks very good for Sunday. So looks like tomorrow there's going to be maybe some rain in the area, especially as I said, a little north of the stadium. But for the game itself, looks pretty good coming up on the weekend. So on Sunday, temperature still cool on Sunday there, but the weather's going to be nice. It's going to be going to be sunny after some rain tomorrow, and should be fine for the game. Kickoff 6:30 on Sunday evening. You know, the game hasn't moved at all from a standpoint of the line. It opened Kansas City 1.5. It went to 1.5 firm, and it has stayed there the entire 2 weeks. So I doubt it moves very much now. I don't think it would move a half point or more. I'd be shocked if it moved a half point. I mean, I think it'll probably stay where it is right now. Kansas City, a slight favorite, 1.5 points for the game, which is minuscule. And over-unders, which I don't dabble in. I'm not a believer in them, never have been. That's 54. Because I think, and I've made this point many times, there's a lot of luck involved. You can have a game where you don't get a lot of movement in the game, and there's a lot of points scored because there's defensive touchdowns, turnovers at the wrong points of the field, or you can get a game where teams drive the ball on each other all night and just don't convert and don't get any other touchdowns and miss field goals and everything else, and the game winds up being, lower scoring than you would think, despite there being a tremendous amount of yardage in the game. So I think there's a randomness to that a little bit. So I'm not a believer, and I don't like to think about that during the game anyway. I'm not I don't sit there and root for points and stuff like that. And most people, 90% of them bet over anyway. They don't bet under. Very few people bet under. So because over, you're always in the game. So that's the bottom line. But not something I believe in. It's about as evenly matched a Super Bowl as you could have. You can make a very good case for San Francisco because of their two-way balance. They are very good defensively. They are very good offensively in the running game. They've scored a lot of points this year, so has Kansas City. I know there's this idea of the now time for Kansas City being the now team. I don't think there is such a thing as a now team. I think you have to go there and play well. I don't think there's ever a moment where it's yours. Okay, I don't think there's ever a moment where it's preordained that somebody's going to win the Super Bowl. You have to go there and you have to execute. That's what it really comes down to. Go there and play your game. I have had this feeling for the past couple of weeks. Well, first of all, I've thought Kansas City was going to win the Super Bowl all year. I've thought they were going to win the Super Bowl since they lost last year. I've thought it the whole time. I picked them to win the Super Bowl before the season started. I picked them to play New Orleans in the Super Bowl. I picked them in both of their playoff games, even though it looked a little bleak in the first one for a while. So I'm not surprised by them being here. I thought they'd be here. I was looking to pick them as an underdog against Baltimore. I thought the game was going to be Kansas City at Baltimore, and I still would have picked Kansas City. I didn't think Baltimore was going to match up well defensively against Kansas City. I don't think anybody matches up that well against Kansas City. I don't think San Francisco matches up that well against Kansas City because I think San Francisco has some vulnerabilities in their pass coverage, and they have some abilities to get the matchups they want with their three wides and their brilliant tight end and the incredible amount of speed and a quarterback who can, even if he is rushed, even if he vacates the pocket, and this is something that you will watch a lot of on Sunday, and these plays will be critical to the game. They get an initial pass rush. He vacates the pocket. He now moves to an open space to buy time. And as he does that, one of his receivers separates, and he hits that guy either on the move while he's moving or whether he has planted himself in a safer zone somewhere else. He's already vacated that first initial pocket. He now is on the move. He plants himself, and now he waits for the guy to clear. And their guys have an ability to clear because of their incredible speed, and then hits that guy for a big play. So I think they can dictate some things there. San Francisco is not a big blitz team in that there's not, I mean, every team in the NFL will blitz. And if you force them to blitz, they will blitz. But they are not an overly heavy blitz team. They're a team that thinks they can get there with their pass rush, drop into the zones they like to play. But this is a tricky one because they don't have, they're a man short. Any matchup they get, because of what Kelsey can bring and because of the speed of Hill, they are you're always a matchup player short against them somewhere. They can force you into a matchup you don't like. So and Andy is great at getting the guy he wants, whether it's Kelsey on a particular player or forcing them to have somebody declare the Hill alone, and they don't care who that is. They'll take that matchup. It can be Sherman, it can be anybody. Sherman can't play with, he can't run with him. I mean, not even a little. Sherman's a really good player. I mean, we know he's a top player, but he can't run with him. And they'll look for those matchups and get them a lot with how they formation things. They do a great job with that. Also, how they utilize the run game in all of this, the threat of the run game in all of this, especially with Hill, and the idea of them trying to make you cover horizontally as well as vertically. They like to run their vertical looks, their 4 vertical looks, and they're tricky. And Andy, with 2 weeks, is a master. He really is. He's great when he's got extra time. He's a master at that. And so I think they'll move the ball. I don't have any question with that. The question you have with them is, and I noted it the last couple of days, go back to weeks 5 and 6 of the regular season and look at the games Kansas City played. And you see their fear. And their fear is they get hit with that kind of game. And that game is one where their offense doesn't get on the field because they can't stop the opposing running game. And they don't get the ball enough. And if you go look at the Texans game that beat them 31-24, ran the ball down their throat, kept the ball for 84 plays versus 47 for the Chiefs, they trailed in that game 17-3, and they pulled that off. Because everyone talks about, the Chiefs need a fast start. The Chiefs need a fast start. The Chiefs don't need a fast start. This year, when the Chiefs, with Mahomes, didn't score in the first quarter, they were unbeaten. The 3 games they lost this year, they scored first in all 3 games they lost with Mahomes. They lost 3 games with Mahomes this year. And all 3, the other opposing team ran the ball well. In 2 out of 3, they kept the ball for almost 40 minutes. And they had a huge advantage in number of plays. And in all 3 games, Kansas City scored first. So the idea that Kansas City has to score first in this game is ridiculous. They don't. You don't want to see them have a nightmarish start. They don't want to get down 24-0. They would prefer not to get down 17-7. But they have no problems in games where the other team scores first. As a matter of fact, they've actually been better in games when they don't score first. I know that's a peculiarity. So I don't see them, as I've heard the last couple of days, I don't see them taking the ball to start the game. A lot of people say, the way they've played the last 2 weeks, they win the coin flip, they're taking the ball. I wouldn't. I'd defer. Now, most teams defer. But I would defer because I'd like to set up the half if I can. And I'll take my chances letting the other team, a little nervous, a little tight, have the ball first. I'm never opposed to that because a lot of times in that, there's just a little feeling out period at the beginning of the game with that. Now, I think if San Francisco gets the ball first, their first play of the game will be a pass. That's just something I think. Just because everyone's expecting a run, you'll get a pass. And as you know, Garoppolo has incredible numbers with play action passes on first down. He averages like 12 yards per pass attempt on first down. So they make it look like a run. Use run personnel. Bring him back against the flow and then drag the tight end, bingo, and away and away you go. I mean, that's a nice game starter for them, and they do it all the time. So, and these teams have had incredible success on first down. And that is an MO of Shanahan's teams anyway, is that they're very good on first down. When he was calling the plays for the Falcons, they were the number one team in the league on first down. Average yards per play on first down, they were number one in the league that year. San Francisco is number one in the league this year. So they confound people on first down. They do a great job on first down. As a matter of fact, if you look at any of the Shanahan teams that he runs, his teams are very, very good on first down. The average yards per play on first down, they are exceptional. Right at the top of the league, almost year in, year out. Has to do with their imaginative running game, happens to do with some of the things they do off the running game. Conversely, in the playoffs, Kansas City has been sensational on first down with their passing game, averaging over 8 yards. I mean, that's unbelievable. So they've been wonderful in that regard. So first down here is going to be very, very tough, and it's going to be very telling on both these teams, because these two teams have succeeded on first down with their offenses enormously in the postseason and really throughout the season. Have done a very, very good job in that regard. Now, Kansas City, let's be honest, they're a passing team, okay? And Andy is the Andy is the most pass-happy play caller in the history of the National Football League. So the ball is going to be in the air most of the time. They are going to run the ball to keep people honest. They are going to throw the ball to get yardage, to get scores. That's how they play. They are the most pass-happy team, and he is the most pass-happy play caller in the history of the sport. It has always been that way. That's why people think that they aren't great with the lead, except Kansas City just never stops attacking when they have the lead. So instead of them worrying about the 4-minute game, they don't. They just attack. And they just keep attacking because that's the way they play. But this game, as we talked about, and we'll have Breer with us at 5:30. We'll be on the fan at 6. We'll have picks after 6. This game, to me, the first thing I want to see is I know Kansas City is going to have some trouble with the San Francisco's going to have some trouble with the Kansas City passing attack. Everybody does. They're going to. They're more comfortable in zone than they are in man. You can't play them any one way. You got to change things up. You got to get some pass rush. We know all the rules. The bigger thing is I want to see how Kansas City handles the San Francisco running game, because this is the essence of the game. If this doesn't work really well for San Francisco, they're in big trouble. And if it works really well for San Francisco, Kansas City's in big trouble. Where we get a good game is if it works a pretty decent amount of the time. Not every time. And then we got ourselves a really competitive game. The running game that Kansas City is going to have to declare a couple of things here against this running game, and they did a very good job against Tennessee. That was, to me, the real unsung part of that game was they got a lot more out of Chris Jones than they could have hoped for. But what they were able to do is they knew, based on personnel, when they were going to run Henry. And they were able to utilize and get Jones in the game on those downs based on personnel. Tennessee's very obvious about when they're going to run and when they're not going to run. Very obvious. San Francisco's not obvious at all. So Jones can't play every down. At least that's what everyone's figuring. And to have him out on key downs where they need his penetration is going to be a bit of a problem, because now they'll have to move him in and out, but it's a little bit of a guessing game because you just don't know. They don't declare. They'll pass it out of their run personnel, They'll run it out of what you think is their pass personnel, but they'll really pass it a lot more out of their two tights. And you know they like to use the fullback. You know how good they are at the point of attack with their blocking game, with their tight end and their running backs, and then the speed of their halfbacks. Whether they're running the zone inside or running it outside, they set you up. They grind you down, they set you up, and then they hit you for the big play with the running game with their speed because all three of their backs, and it looks like Coleman's going to play. So last week's hero will probably have to back off a little bit, and they'll let Coleman play, and they'll let Mostert play, and then we'll see if Breida plays. Breida has a habit of putting the ball on the ground. That's the one thing about him. You might not see a lot of him because of his ability. And my understanding is all the guys who you're worried about have all been good this week. Jones, they say, is good if you're Kansas City. Alexander and Coleman and Taut are good for San Francisco. So everybody that anyone's had any issues with, as far as whether they're healthy or not, everybody practiced. Everyone looks good. No issues. Everybody's there. No excuses. So no one's bringing up any issues as far as that goes. Full participation. Kansas City has good personnel on the line. They have very capable players in the secondary. The Honey Badge is a very critical player for them. They're a little weak at the linebackers. San Francisco, you worry about them in some of their matchups and coverage in the corner. Now they've gone to Mosley because the other kid had like a neon sign on him and he kept getting burnt every play. You know, early in the playoffs, he was just to get attacked every play. But they can be beaten in some of those secondary matchups. But their linebackers are really good, and they're good in coverage. And we know what kind of pass rush they have. When Ford and Bosa are on the field together, they're scary. I mean, their pass rush numbers are off. They're historic. Absolutely historic. But the question is, can Mahomes, even if they have success with the initial pass rush, meaning they win the matchup that they like against one of the guards, win that matchup, crash the pocket, is that a winner, or is that just him now out of the pocket? Does he, because of what he can do with his legs and his arm on the run and his ability to get out of that first situation, his escapability and his ability then to make the throw on the move or by establishing his feet again and making the throw, that's where he can wreak havoc on the San Francisco defense. Now, in Mahomes' short career, he's done something that's very rare. He has put up over 30 points in every one of his playoff games. Now, they're built for that, number one. But think about it. They were doing nothing against the Patriots. They put up 31 points in the second half, 24 in the fourth quarter. They didn't score against the Texans, and they put up 51 points the rest of the game. The Texans helped them, I understand that, but they still put up 51 points. They can be incredibly explosive very quickly. And this is a player who, with the weapons that he has, the speed that he has, and in the concepts of what they have a tight end who is one of the great targets we've seen. He's not the blocker Kittle is. But his ability to play underneath, his ability to be a range target, meaning if you need 8 yards, he gets it. If you need him in the red zone, he's there. His ability to catch the ball in traffic, all the things that he does, he is an exceptional target. And with the speed they have, and a guy who has the legs, the arm, and just the instincts that Mahomes has. Mahomes could rule this game the way Montana did. Montana came to this game and he was flawless. Absolutely flawless. Yes, he had weapons. Yes, he had a guy who was, orchestrating it wonderfully, but it was flawless. They never missed a beat. Breer will join us at 5:30. We'll be joined locally by FN. I guess they're getting their commercials ready is what they're doing at 6 o'clock. We'll have picks at that time. So that's coming up on the Fan at 6 o'clock. As we were saying was that if San Francisco has success where they get to it's third down, they crash the pocket. They do the things they expect to do to win the play. Do they win the play because of the presence of Mahomes? Or does he, with his uncanny ability, make it that that's not good enough to win the play? That's vacating him from his initial spot does not win the play. That gives him a quality that most players don't have. And that makes him, doubly hard to deal with, because if you have to get him twice to get him down, or can you get there and surround him? So the idea is, guys, we want to crash the pocket, but we want to keep him in the pocket while we crash it. So what we're going to do is we're going to attack in such a way where we're going to know where he is rather than let him vacate and then make the throw as he gets his receivers to separate, because his receivers know that once he moves, they start their move again, and then they start coming across this field. There's no way the defenders can stay with them horizontally as they come across this field because they're just too fast. Now you've created open space again and open lanes for him to throw the ball to these guys and turn them into big plays. So it's enough to stop someone once. To have to stop them twice on each pass play makes it a very, very difficult chore. And he does have that uncanny knack. He also has the ability to just flick the ball because he has such a strong throwing arm that his ability to throw and move is exceptional. There are not a lot of guys there are guys who do it well. Rodgers has always been a master at it. One of the unsung guys at doing it, who did it incredibly well, was Tony Romo. Tony Romo was a great slide and throw guy in the pocket. Very accurate. Very good at getting away from that initial thrust from the defense and then sliding, buying time, and making his throw while he slid in the pocket. Mahomes does a lot of that. But what he'll also do is he'll quick-foot it out of there and then plant himself again and look for his throw. So he's made them realize, now, guys, I vacated, so now you should be moving. And when I plant, now I'm looking for the guy who has created space. I'm looking for the guy now who I see has now created space. Now I'm going to lead him, and there's my play. And that makes it, like I said, a very, very tough chore. Garoppolo hasn't gotten a lot of attention here as the second quarterback. And many times in the Super Bowl, the secondary quarterback has done very well in these games. The guy who is not the star. Don't look any farther than, or is not recognized as the equal of the other guy. Might be a very good player, might even be a star. But let's say Eli Manning twice to Tom Brady as an example. Okay? There are games where you have two guys who you really can't pick when you have like Breeze and Peyton Manning, okay? It's a flip of a coin. I understand that. But there are times where the battle has gone to the Eli Manning against Tom Brady, to the Flacco, okay? All different times, many different guys. So it isn't always the guy. But then there are the guys who have come here and have done really well, who have owned this game. And, of course, two of them are Tom Brady and more than any other player by such a wide margin, Joe Montana. And when I think Mahomes, I think Montana. Because Montana, if you look at his numbers in the Super Bowl, they're overwhelming. He didn't have okay Super Bowls. He had sensational Super Bowls. He had staggering numbers. And yes, played in some one-sided games. And I know he has no interceptions in the history of the Super Bowl. Could have had one. Yeah. Did a Bengal drop a ball once that was in his hands? Yeah. Well, once in a while it's going to happen. You're going to throw a ball that's not going to get caught by the defense. That does happen. They don't catch every ball. So that's the one really errant pass where you could just say that should have been intercepted. And it should have been. But it wasn't. Just like the ball Eli threw against the Pats wasn't intercepted. It doesn't happen every time. But that has happened to Tom Brady. That has happened to every quarterback who's ever played in the Super Bowl. Plenty of times. Balls that should have been intercepted weren't. Balls that should have been pick sixes got dropped. It's the luck of the draw. You're not going to have every single one of them done. All right, 6 o'clock, we will go to FAN. We'll have picks and everything else when we do that. Right now, we'll welcome in Albert Breers. We'll see how his week's been, and we'll get into a couple of things going on around the league right now. Albert, welcome. How are you?
I'm good. How you doing, Mike?
All right. Let me start with the whole idea of the collective bargaining and what the players' thought process is. Considering the NFL and meaning management and ownership really wants to change the schedule and change preseason and make the change now that we're into a new world of streaming, change everything, change the number of playoff teams, really remodel the sport. How open are the players and the Players Association to getting what they want, whether it be union money, whether it be health care, whatever it may be? How open are they, when they've been so adamant in the past, how open are they to changing the schedule?
Well, I mean, I think the key thing is that the league's going to have to make it worth their while. They believe they have leverage right now. The NFL wants to go to 17 games. And the players are willing to play ball, but they see this as an avenue to get more money. And I'm not talking about more money just, via the incremental games that you would get off of going from 16 to 17 games. It's also a hike in the total percentage and
right.
All of that.
They want a game changer. Right,
and there's very few points. There's been very few points over the last 30, 35 years when they had leverage. I think in 2006, some people would say they had leverage because Paul Tagliabue wanted to leave office without having any sort of work stoppage on his record, and so he wanted to get a deal done. They knew that. They capitalized. They did a good deal for themselves in 06. That's how it rolled back a little bit in 11. But it's just not very common that they have a lot of leverage. Right now, I think they do for several different reasons. One is 17 games. I think the other is there's a small group of owners, Mike, that has a vested interest in getting this thing off the books and getting this thing taken care of so they can move on to broadcast deals. And if they can get the broadcast deals done, then that, of course, opens the door for them to start working on a gambling side. And so, there's just a lot of things that work here for the owners where they're looking big picture, and I think it's a good opportunity for the players to take advantage of that and get a bigger piece of the pie than they got the last time around.
A couple of years ago, when the players felt, and rightly so, that the owners had been really disingenuous with the whole concussion issue and everything else, there was not any, as an owner said to me, you can't even bring up extra games to these players. That's clearly, at least from what you've heard from their people, their leadership, that has changed a little bit. Do you think the rank and file will be for it, or do you think they're going to have to really be swayed to vote for an extra game or two? And I think they should go 18 and do it over 20 weeks. I think that's more and get rid of preseason. I think that would be more advantageous for the players in the long run. Instead of one, do two. Let the NFL have its international game. Do two. Even get the piece of the playoff money in the next round by adding around the playoffs if you're the players. Get a piece of the playoff money this time, but also get a bye in each of the half of the seasons. Get 18 over 20 weeks and get 2 byes. I think that's the way to go rather than 17. But be that as it may, do you think the players if they voted the league, do you think there's a majority that would agree to more games, or is that going to be a hard sell?
I think it's going to take some convincing. And I think it's going to take financial inducement. And I think, ultimately, if you're telling players there's going to be a $300 million cap in a few years, then I certainly see where they think you could say, okay, like that makes some sense for us if we're going to get that much back. I think another thing that you got to work through is the work rules. I know part of that's going to be the off season, how that sets up, training camp, how that sets up. But I mean, Mike, here's the other thing is, if I'm an individual player, right, I'm looking at it and I'm saying, how long does it take me to get to free agency? Right now, it's 4 years, which is 64 games, right? So you got to make it through 64 games to get to free agency. Well, if you're going to 17 games, that number becomes 68. Doesn't sound that significant. That's still 4 more opportunities to get injured. That's 4 more games of wear and tear. So I think that there's that part of it too. I think there's a way for the league to sell the players on this. I do think a big piece of this has to do with Roger Goodell, having the revenue goal out there, the total revenue goal of $25 billion, and this is a creative way to do it.
And listen, the players should realize that this is a chance with streaming, with gambling, with everything changing, and clearly both sides want to dump preseason. We know that, okay? Nobody wants any part of it. You'll go to these controlled scrimmages where teams will meet for a couple of days. There just won't be any more preseason as we know it. We know it's almost dead now. They got to kill preseason. They all know it. They can't sell it to anybody. The fans don't want it. Nobody wants it. So they know that's a dead issue, and it has to go away. But they have a chance to grow their revenue appreciably, and the players, I think, if they're smart, can really go to town this time.
Yeah, and that's, I think there are some common sense things that will happen. One that you mentioned it right there was cutting down the preseason. Another might be, even going further to limit contact at training camp. I do think, that and this even goes beyond just the players. It's about selling it to the public too, that they do care about, the well-being of the players. And so, it wouldn't surprise me if there are more measures taken to limit the injury risk and limit the wear and tear on the players. So I think all of that stuff is open for discussion. I think all of that stuff is going to be part of the discussion. It's going to be interesting to see, like, exactly where that sweet spot is, because I know the owners felt like coming out of 06 that they had given too much, and that was maybe a result of Paul Tagliabue doing his last CBA and wanting to get out of it clean, and the players taking advantage of it. And as a result of that, the owners, there was a lot of that, like, we got to take our league back for everything. So how far are the owners willing to go in this case where, it's not about anybody's legacy, it's about getting a 17th game, it's about growing revenue. How far are they willing to go to make all that happen? And how can the players trust that this isn't going to be just a bait and switch where, they do a 5-year CBA and then the owners are coming back to them trying to roll back the numbers in 5 years?
All right, before we get to talk about the game a little bit, a lot of stuff going on right now, especially with these older quarterbacks. Give me your thoughts on this. Breeze, retirement or back with New Orleans?
I think one more year with New Orleans. I still think he has unfinished business. The way the last 3 years have ended, he hadn't told me this directly, but I would assume that they're pretty frustrating for him.
Can he beat Hill out next year? I mean, because everyone says Sean wants to play Hill at quarterback. I mean, does he?
I think that I'd be interested to see if there was some sort of agreement on that, and how they were going to handle that and everything else. I don't know that Taysom Hill is ready to be a starting quarterback in the NFL. And the other thing you got to remember too, Mike, is he's not that young. I believe he's 28 years old. Is that the long-term answer for the Saints? Sean loves him. Sean would love to see him, I think in a full-time capacity. Are you willing to go all in on him right now? That's a fair question. And if you aren't, is there a way to sort of ease him into the lineup using Drew Brees in his final go-around? So lots of fair questions to be asked there. I think Brees probably comes back for another year, but the fact that he's dragged his feet on this decision significantly longer than he did last year tells you he's at least thinking about it.
Rivers to Indy or Rivers to Tampa?
I would. I think if Rivers had his brothers, I wouldn't be surprised if he personally wanted to go to Tennessee.
I don't know. I don't think they want him though in Tennessee. I think they have their eyes on somebody else.
Yeah, I think they have their eyes on somebody else, so we can get to him in a minute.
Yeah, but if Rivers has India, Tennessee, if he has India, Tampa Bay, which one do you think he takes?
I would think so. I would think Indy might make a little more sense for him from a football standpoint, but obviously from a family standpoint, Tampa make more sense. I think one thing to remember too, like I know people have brought up Tampa and act as if he'd be like living in like St. Pete or something like that. His family lives in the Panhandle. You know how far that is.
It's a long way. It's a long way.
I
yes.
mean, that's not like
right.
you're not going to be taking.
No, that's a long way. Long way.
Yeah,
yes.
you aren't commuting from where they are up in A1A in the Panhandle.
You think he'll get a job though, right?
I still all right. So I'll just tell you this: the Chargers haven't made a final decision yet. I think the likelihood is that they probably move on, but I do know there's a feeling in that building like maybe it makes sense just to tag him for one more year to buy ourselves a year to get our quarterback plan in order. If it's not the Chargers, Tampa's interesting to me. What do they do with Jameis Winston? And Indy to me is like the one that if you're the Colts and maybe you want to wait till the 2021 quarterback class to draft your next guy, maybe you bring in Rivers and you let him compete with Jacoby Brissett if he doesn't have other options. The other thing, of course, there is, Rivers is very close with Frank Reich and Nick Sirianni. Both those guys were with him in San Diego. So that makes some sense, too. I think the other quarterback to watch from a veteran standpoint with the Colts would be Nick Foles, just because of the same relationship.
All right, now let's get to Tom. New England, Chargers, Tennessee. You still think New England over the other two? Chargers obviously would be to sell tickets and to be the front man, and that's close to everything in his life. And then the idea of him and Vrabel trying to win it in Tennessee.
Yeah, I think the idea of playing for Mike probably appeals to Tom. It's one of those situations where I think it's an organization that would accommodate him that's in a kind of a funny spot right now. Where they were knocking on the door. They've made real progress over Mike Vrabel's first 2 years. They've got real identity, and the quarterback doesn't need to be a superhero for them to win games. So it's got a lot of those forces in place that would I think make it pretty comfortable for Tom to go there. Tennessee still makes the most sense to me. The other thing you want to remember here too, Mike, is that Tom has a son that lives in New York. And that's part of the reason why they've been looking in real estate in Greenwich and Alpine, New Jersey, and all of that is because, and this is like a really common sense human thing, right? If you don't know where you're going to be professionally over the next year, but you do know where your family's going to be for the next 20 years, where do you move them? Well, you probably move them where they're going to be for the next 20 years.
Yeah, and his mom's been on the same TV show for 9 years in a row in New York. So
right.
Yeah,
and that's the thing is is it easier for him to go to Nashville and then that's hour and a half on a private jet from New York, right?
Yep.
Probably. That probably makes the most sense. So Nashville, the Titans line up best, I think, for Tom. And I do think that there'd be an appeal to Vrabel for the idea of let's go show Bill. Let's go take this and jam it where the sun don't shine on
Yeah, it's
Bill,
funny. Yeah.
I do think that might could appeal to Tom that way, too.
Do you think Miami is going to draft Tua?
I don't think any of the teams know if they're going to be allowed to draft Tua right now. You know how this stuff works, Mike. I mean, until the doctors get a look at the guy,
right.
They don't. A lot of times, teams will tell you this. I don't know if my doctor's going to let him. And I know that sounds crazy because these coaches and GMs have so much power. But in a lot of these cases, the doctor literally says, you can't draft that guy in the first round. Because they'll look at what's on there and say, it can be a yes or no thing. It can be, I'm comfortable with you taking a risk on him in the fourth round, but not in the first round. So I think a lot of that stuff's still up in the air. Do they like him? I think they like him. Yeah. There are a lot of moving parts with all the quarterbacks, the top three quarterbacks. And so I think there's a lot of intrigue coming over the next few months, and not only with Justin Herbert and Tua Tagovailoa, but also with Joe Burrow.
Oh, you don't think he goes to Cincinnati?
Well, I mean, look, you saw what Carson Palmer said about playing in Cincinnati and the advice he'd give Burrow, and now Carson's brother is training Joe. So Joe's going to have a lot of information on the Bengals, and we know what Carson Palmer thought of his time in Cincinnati.
Right. The one difference is Joe was born 15 minutes from the stadium.
There,
yeah,
right.
yeah.
And so there's like a little bit of a heartstrings thing there.
Right.
So we'll see what happens. I think I would just stay tuned on that one. I still like it is still in the Bengals, but I'd just stay tuned on that one.
Interesting. So it's amazing how many, and Roethlisberger would figure going back to Pittsburgh, right? So it's amazing how many of these older quarterbacks have got interesting storylines next year.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting story when you throw Eli into that whole equation too, and why he decided to retire. I mean, I don't know if there was a logical landing spot with him.
I don't think there was. I don't know if there really was, and I think that was the best thing he could have done. I think that's the smartest way to do that and get it over the finality. I don't think it didn't seem like there was a real, and plus there was too many guys on the market who were still playing this year. With Brady and Rivers and all these guys. I mean, that are out there. I mean, it's like musical chairs this year with these top quarterbacks.
Yeah, and we're going to know a lot more here in the next few weeks. We're going to be there's the franchise tag period coming up. That's February 25th to March 10th, and when we get into that 2-week period, there's going to be a decision coming for the Titans, for the Bucs, and the Chargers. Do the Titans tag Tannehill? Do the Bucs tag Winston? Do the Chargers tag Rivers? If those guys come out of that period without tags, now all of a sudden we've got a free for all, and that's where things can get really, really interesting.
All right, let's get to the game. And, we talk about quarterbacks. This reminds me a little bit, and we'll see. Because San Francisco, listen, they're dangerous, and they're very balanced, and their running attack is scary. But Mahomes enters this game, and he reminds me of when Montana entered this game. And it's almost like he could emerge as the new sensation, and where it's his league now. And I can see this coming, where we all know it's coming from Mahomes anyway, but this could be his ascendancy this weekend. You know what I mean? Where all of a sudden now Mahomes is the man. It's no question. He's the guy. He's he's scored 30 points in each of his playoff games so far in his career. This could be with a big performance this week, and typical for him. 354 touchdowns. I mean, a typical day at the beach for him. And all of a sudden, he's now the generational player in the NFL.
And hey, Mike, you got better historical context on this than I do, but I don't know if there's even a comp for him doing what he's done at his age if he wins the Super Bowl. Marino, I know, won an MVP really young and got to the Super Bowl really young, but he didn't win one.
No, ran into a best Niner team, a great Niner team. Yeah, Bill Walsh said his best Niner team ever. Yeah.
Yeah, and so now, you look at what Pat Mahomes is capable of doing. Winning the MVP in his second year in record-breaking fashion. And this is without playing as a rookie, too. Winning the MVP in just record-breaking fashion as a second-year player, which is what Marino did, right?
Yep.
And then coming back the next year, following it up with a Super Bowl championship, and doing it against a team that comes in with the number 2 ranked defense in the NFL. That to me would take Pat Mahomes as far as the start of a quarterbacking career, maybe to a level we haven't seen before. And so I think it's fascinating. I think, the coolest part about it to me is because he's playing that number 2 defense, because he's up against that defensive line, if he's going to get there, he's really going to have to earn it. And so that's why I think Sunday's so fascinating to watch.
Oh, fascinating. And the other part is they might wind up spectating a lot because there's a great fear, and this is what would keep me awake if I were Andy. I don't want them keeping the ball for 40 minutes and pinning my offense to the, if you go back to weeks 5 and 6, the 2 games they lose, they never have the ball in either game. They scored 13 points against the Colts. The Colts kept the ball for 38 minutes. And then the next week they played Tennessee, and Tennessee ran 84 plays to their 47.
Yeah.
I mean, that can't happen this week. If it does, they're going to lose.
Here's the other thing, Mike. Do you know how close the Niners were to going undefeated?
Yeah, very.
Very.
I mean,
they lost So they lost. Now you think about this, right? They lost on that Monday night to Seattle in overtime.
Yep.
They lost on the last-second field goal in Baltimore in the rain, right? And then they lost on the review where Julio scored the touchdown at the end of the game in San Francisco in December. That's it. Like, that's 3 games lost, like, basically at the wire or in overtime. Like, that's astounding, like, how close they came to being undefeated. And so this is not only, you know, a really well-rounded team, a good team, but a team that, like, really hasn't let a game get away from them.
No, and they're very good team with a lethal running attack and a very good defense, a wonderful pass rush, a huge pass rush, and a tremendous running game. And listen, this year, those games, Kansas City just could not. Now, they're better now than they were then. They're better, clearly, at the end of the season than they were in that middle part of the season. And they did a good job against Tennessee, but this will be harder for them. This will be harder because it's more of a system than stopping one guy. And, you know, the difference was Tennessee was able, against Tennessee, they knew when Tennessee was going to run the ball. They are not going to know when San Francisco is going to run the ball. That's the difference, and that's going to make it harder on Kansas City here. That's my fear if I'm Andy Reid. My fear is that I'm sitting there and I can't get my offense on the field.
Right, and that's why I think it's interesting because I think that there's a very simple way to look at this game from that perspective. Look at the number of possessions, right? Like the total number of possessions.
Yeah, it's got to be over 10. It's got to be over 10 for Kansas City. It's got to be over 10.
Right. Right. Like if it's at 7 or 8.
Oh.
Like, wow.
Huge
now
trouble.
Your margin for error is the piece is cut.
Not going to win. Not going to win that kind of game. It's not going to.
Yeah.
You're not. You got to have it up there. You have to have it up there. I mean, they ran 84 plays. The Texans did to 47 for Houston. I mean for Kansas City, 47 plays. That's you're gonna have a hard time winning those games.
Right. And from that standpoint, like the way Kyle, I think the way Kyle's coached, it's really interesting the way he's evolved and, you know, really become a head coach. And that there were a couple of games this year where you saw him, even as an offensive coach, this is hard to do, right? Like, because you know how the way most of those guys think, it's attack. You go back to the first time they played against the Rams when they won in L.A. and how they really packed it in. And even though they were averaging, I think, 3.5 yards a carry, they kept running the ball. Why were they doing that? Because they wanted to play a certain type of game against the Rams, and they wanted to get the Rams out of their comfort zone. And so I think one of the most interesting things about the way Kyle's coached this year is that he's really become very, very game-specific. You even saw it last week against the Packers, where, you know, like they got up 27-0, and it felt like they could have won that game like 44-0. But they weren't concerned with that in the second half. They were just doing clock, saying to the Packers, if you want to take the 7-8 yard gain, go ahead and take it. And, you know, basically, let the Packers play their way out of having any chance to win in that game. And so that's the part of it that I think is really interesting here, is Kyle's done such a good job of just coherently game managing all year long. And it'll be really, really interesting to see how he chooses to manage this one.
Yeah, fascinating. I mean, two teams playing very well. I mean, two teams executing very well, very different offensively. A lot of stars on both sides of the ball. Young players like Bosa, guys like Kittle, obviously Mahomes. You got Hill. You got the Honey Badger. You got Sherman. Yeah, I mean, you got a lot of stars, a lot of big players in this game.
Yep. And it's, you know, to me, like the best way to describe it, because I think they're two really good rosters. They've done a good job building. Both teams have done a good job developing talent too, which is an underrated thing. It's not just picking talent; it's developing it. You even see guys like Eric Armstead, who, you know, looked like he was going to be, I guess, sort of average a little earlier in his career, and he's really become an important piece for them. I think you look at where. You look at where they are from a roster standpoint, both are in a good spot. I'd say, like, the best way to kind of describe it is one team here needs its quarterback to be a superhero, and the other team doesn't. And I just feel like most of the time, like on this stage, as important as a quarterback is, the team that doesn't need its quarterback to be a superhero is the one that wins. And I think that's one of the reasons why Tom Brady's Patriots had the number of Peyton Manning's coach for all those years. And I think Brady's a better player, but on top of that, the Patriots went into these games. They didn't need Tom Brady to throw for 300 yards to win. They could win different ways, and that's who I think the Niners are right now. And I'm not so sure that Chiefs can be that team where if the Niners find a way to continue the passing game, they can win a different way.
Yeah, no, I think that, listen, Mahomes, if Kansas City wins, Mahomes is having a big game. There's no way around that. I mean, but I don't think anybody can stop that Kansas City offense anyway. I don't think there's any way to stop it. You might keep it down in the mid-20s, you'll never stop it. I mean, there's nobody. They only scored, under 20 points once this year. They're going to get their points. So they're just too explosive. I mean, that's all there is to it. The question is how much they're going to have the ball is really the question.
Right, and we saw that in the Houston game. How quickly they come back. I mean, I don't know. I felt like in that game after the fake punt, kind of got screwed up there for the Texans. It really quickly turned.
Enormously.
Really,
that was the most bizarre second quarter I've ever seen.
Yeah, and just the capability to turn it on like that is, there have been very few offenses that we've seen over the years that I think has been able to kind of press a button like that one can and just completely flip a game on its head. And it's sort of, in a way, like it's, a little reminiscent of, I think the greatest show on turf Rams or the 1990s Bills when they were at their best, where it's, a 3-point deficit can turn into a 20-point lead really, really quickly.
Well, those two teams played great games. The Tennessee Ram game was a great game, and the Giant Bill game, the first game, was a great game.
Yeah.
If we get one of those, we're in good shape. We get one of those games that goes right to the wire, and we get a classic 3-point game. 27-24, somebody. You know what? It's good for everybody. It's good. It's
kind of interesting too. You bring up those two games, like same sort of contrast in styles in those teams too. If you think about it. You had the Giants and the Titans, and I guess the Niners would be a little bit more like them, and then you had the Bills and the Rams, and the Chiefs would be a little bit more like them.
Yeah, no question. And the Giants kept Buffalo off that game plan, which everyone talks about the defense, which was wonderful. But the offense kept the ball for 40 minutes that day running the football and kept the Bills pinned to the sideline. And they scored 19 points in 19 minutes, which isn't bad, but they never had the ball the whole game. I mean, that was it. And I think that's the fear if I'm Andy and Spags, tomorrow is I have to get them. Not only do I have to tackle them and get them off the field, but I have to get them from just controlling and playing keep away with the ball for great lengths of time. I can't have these 15 play drives that put my offense to sleep.
Right. And I think it's going to be, to me, like the game could be won or lost if you think about it on Niners offense, Chiefs defense first down, right? Like how often can the Chiefs get the Niners off schedule and force them into second and third and long? Like that's going to be such a key. Is like what happens on those first downs. The Niners have the ball. They have a full menu of plays. They can do whatever they want. Can the Chiefs kind of create losses or limit games in those sorts of situations? It's going to be a really, really important piece of it.
Have you been around the two teams this week?
I have been.
Someone told me that Kansas City has been outrageously loose. Is that true?
Yeah. I'd say that's true. Yeah, and I think they're still taking on the person.
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I don't know.
It's hard to say.
It is hard to say, but have you noticed that though that they haven't been very buttoned down?
It's hard to say. It's hard to say because often not the best thing you can be is what you've been all year. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like it's such a different environment. You get in the stadium and I don't know how many of them you've been to, Mike. But
about almost 40 now, about 35, over 35, maybe more. I got to count them one day, but between 35 and 40, something like that.
It's different. Like the stadium's different. Everything about it's different.
Oh, so different now. The game it's changed so much. It has changed completely. It's so different than it used to be even 10 years ago.
Yeah, and so you walk into the stadium and you're dealing with something that's completely out of the norm. And so I feel like if you are treating it in the league leading up any different than you would any other game, then that's a problem. So the loose versus button up thing. I generally have sort of thought here that however you normally act, however the team acted before the divisional playoff or the conference championship, you know, it would be again going into this week.
Who do you like?
I like the Niners. I'll go back to that principle. They don't need a quarterback to wear an S on his chest, on Sunday. And I think Jimmy will make plays, but they don't need Jimmy to be a superhero. And so I like the Niners. I will tell you this, though. When I was picking the game, at first I thought about it. I'm like, I think this could be a 10 or 14-point Niner win. Then you start to think more about the President's home. So I cut the number down, and I'm at 3 now, where I said 27-24. But, God, even picking that scares me because it's like all that means is it's coming down to the wire. And if number 15 has the ball in his hands, is the last one to have the ball in his hands, I have a hard time doubting.
That would be fun. Well, listen, thanks for coming on. I enjoyed the week. Thanks very much for coming on, Albert. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it.
All right. We'll be back right after this. Two things. One, obviously, that will be an emotional scene. The last part of this, other than the stuff that will be family-oriented, would be the Lakers coming back. So that will be obviously a very emotional thing this evening. Number two, I wanted to mention the retirement of Curtis Granderson. 15 years from now, no one in this town is going to think that much about Curtis Granderson. When they talk and they're doing sports talk 20 years from now, they'll pull out the stuff and talk about Thurman Munson or Don Mattingly. They'll talk about obviously Derek Jeter and that great Yankee run. They'll say, was DeGrom really that good? Hopefully they're talking about Alonso's home runs by then. But a guy like Granderson, he'll fall somewhere in the middle there and he'll get lost. But you know what? Granderson had a very interesting baseball career. First of all, he always caught my eye when he was with the Tigers because, you don't usually see guys hitting 20 triples. And I always liked him. So when the Yankees got him, I was fascinated by him, but he was not the same player when the Yankees got him that he was in Detroit. First of all, he wasn't as good an outfielder as I thought he was. Secondly, he became a dead pull hitter who basically fell in love with the porch and stopped doing what he did when he'd have, 38 doubles and 20 triples and 20 homers in Detroit. He obviously said, you know what? I'm going to get pull happy here. And I'm going to hit the ball out of the ballpark, as he did, hitting 41 and 43 homers for the Yankees. And as you know, he loved hitting at Yankee Stadium. When he went back to Yankee Stadium, he hit home runs. He was grooved into Yankee Stadium. He was made for there are guys who are made for the lower porch. Okay, there are guys who are made for the lower deck. Bobby Mercer was made for the lower deck and right. All right. A guy who played for the Tigers, a little second baseman named Dick McAuliffe, was made for the Yankee Stadium lower deck and right. Granderson was made for the lower deck and right. I mean, he had a grooved swing to flip the ball into the seats in the lower deck and right. Some guys just do. And now a lot of righties have taken to doing it and have gotten very good at it. I mean, Jeter was very good at it. With that inside-out Jeterian swing of his, he could dump him down in there too. But Granderson, he had some, this guy scored 136 runs for the Yankees one year. That's an outrageous number of runs. I mean, think about it. You can't find that many times guys score 130 runs in a season. He scored 136 runs. He had 40 home runs twice. He had a year for the Yankees that he had 41 homers, 119 RBIs, and 136 runs scored. That's a sensational season. He went over to the Mets, and he had some very odd years in that he had these wicked slumps. But you know what? When the Mets made their run, he had a great September. I mean, he carried them. And he had some good years for them. I mean, he hit 30 homers for them. He hit 26 homers for them. He hit 30 homers for them. I mean, he had some weird years there, which I'd be the first to admit, because he had some prolonged slumps that were crazy. But he had some really good years there. So to me, always a very intelligent guy, a nice guy. Played 16 seasons. You play 16 seasons in the majors, and you hit 40 homers for the Yankees twice, and you hit 30 homers for the Mets, and you play in big games for the Yankees, and you play in big games for the Mets, and you wind up hitting, 350 doubles and 350 homers. Not exact, like 340 something and 346 doubles and 344 homers or whatever it was. And I always thought if you scored 1,000 runs or you knocked in 1,000 runs, and especially if you did both, you had a really good career. It's not easy to score 1,000 runs, not easy to knock in 1,000 runs. And this guy scored 1,200 runs, almost knocked in 1,000 runs, and hit 344 home runs. That's a heck of a career. Not a Hall of Famer by any stretch of the imagination. I wouldn't tell you that he was. By any, the guy hit 250 for his career. His batting average, once he learned to pull at Yankee Stadium, just kept going down and down and down. As you know, he became just a crazy pull hitter. Early in his career, I mean, he sprayed the ball around, hit 270, hit 280, hit 302, but that was when he was playing a little differently. When he came there and saw the light, saw the friendly combines, all he wanted to do was hit home runs. But you know what? I thought he had a heck of a career. I really did. I thought he made an impact. And I'm not telling you he's going to be an all-time anything, or an all-time Yankee, or an all-time Met, or an all-time great, or a Hall of Fame. He's not any of that stuff. But that's a guy that, like I said, 10 to 15 years ago, from now, no one will even think of remembering him. But he had an impact here. He really did. So, the tip of a hat for a good career. I like Granderson. Now, the Super Bowl. Finally. We are finally there. It hasn't gotten the incredible overkill that Super Bowls always get because it's been such a weird couple of weeks, from the sign stealing stuff to all the managerial issues that caused, and all the firings and rehirings and press conferences and everything that went on there, to now this tragedy that everybody's still trying to dig out from under in LA with Kobe Bryant. So it has actually, if anything possibly can, it has actually put the Super Bowl on the back burner for a couple of days, which is almost impossible to do. It would take a tragedy the likes of which we've seen from Kobe Bryant to ever do that. Very few things can supplant the Super Bowl. But it actually did for a couple of days. It actually put the Super Bowl on hold. You know, there was nowhere in this country for a couple of days. I don't care where you flipped on a show. And didn't have to even be it could be one of those Entertainment Tonight type shows. You know, it could be one of those magazine shows. It didn't have to be just a sports show, but anything you flipped on, it was going to be about Kobe and his daughter and this horrific accident and the impact and the legacy and what he left behind and, you know, the impact that he had on everybody. And that will even be felt this week as the NFL will even in some way pay homage to his passing in the pregame. I don't know exactly how yet, but they're going to do something, is my understanding. So it's actually made it a quicker 2 weeks than we're used to, which is good, because that can be a little tedious. But this game is a fascinating game, I think. Two teams come here playing very well. Two teams with very differing styles, very efficient at what they do. Storylines abound. Stars abound. Talented players, speed, incredible speed throughout the lineup. Not just the Kansas City offense, the San Francisco defense, the San Francisco running backs. I mean, very, very, very quick players. Talented players. And two teams that could not be more different in how they approach things. Makes for a fascinating game. With the first pick in the plumbing and heating supply draft, contractors select supplyhouse.com. Take the field at supplyhouse.com on Monday, February 3rd, and to get 1% off for each touchdown scored in the big game. So if you're rooting for that, root for a bunch of touchdowns. Take it to the house, supplyhouse.com. Back after this. You know, this game, when you match up Super Bowls, a lot of times you're looking for something to hang your hat on. This game's fascinating from a lot of standpoints. Number one, you have teams that are playing very well coming into the game, which you like. They're confident. Someone told me that the Chiefs, I haven't been down at the Super Bowl yet this week. I'm going to the game. But they tell me the Chiefs are as loose as any team they've ever seen. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I used to think teams that were tight, you know, Vermeil's team was tight, they lost to the Raiders. Marv Levy's team was tight, they lost to the Giants. I don't think that's why they lost to the Giants in Tampa. I just think they were really tight. You don't want to see a team really tight. You don't want to see a head coach really tight, but you don't want to see a team going crazy either. So I don't know that it has an impact. I think so. You know, so many times it comes down to little things. You have two teams they've been very good all year. You know, I mean, Kansas City, Mahomes has scored over 30 points in each of the playoff games he's played so far in his career. He's come from 10 and 24 points back in the last 2 weeks to win going away. His team is 14-4 this year. Really, 13-3 with him in the lineup. They won one and lost one with him out. In the 3 games they lost, they scored first. And in 2 of the 3, the Colts and the Texans kept the ball for almost 40 minutes in both games. 38 for the Colts, 40 for the Texans. That can't happen this week. That's the biggest fear you have if you're Andy. Kansas City, San Francisco is 15-3, really out of nowhere. They were in every game to the final minute that they lost. They had an incredible season. You know, they both have done a really good job in terms of consistency. Kansas City's been a really good team the second half of the season. They've been a much better defensive team the second half of the season. You know, from that standpoint, really have done a good job there. They played, I thought, very sound defense down the stretch. I think San Francisco was consistent all year. You have 2 dynamic offensive teams, but very different ones. You have the San Francisco team that plays this really unique zone running game that looks to overpower opponents in a variety of ways. This is hands down from father to son. Mike Shanahan played this. He has handed it down to Kyle Shanahan. Mike Shanahan won Super Bowls with it. It is a very hard offense to decipher because you can do a lot of different things out of the same personnel. He doesn't give away his running. Like when Tennessee's going to run, you know they're going to run. They have certain personnel in the game, and they're going to run. You know when they're going to pass, you know when they're going to run. You know it as soon as you watch them play. With San Francisco, they're going to pass the ball when you think they're going to run it because they do it out of the same formation, and they do it out of the same personnel. So they don't give you a key as to when they're going to run the ball. And they have been incredibly efficient on first down. Shanahan teams since he's been a coordinator in the league, have been very efficient on first down. Go look at his Atlanta team that blew the big lead to the Pats in the Super Bowl. That team averaged 7.5 yards per play on first down, which was number one in the league. This year, San Francisco is number one in the league on first down. That means a lot of play action on first down. And on first down, Garoppolo is over 12 yards per pass attempt on first down play action. They are lethal on first down. In the playoffs so far, Kansas City's averaging over 8 yards of pass play on first down, which is outstanding. So these teams are very good. So you have one time, you have the running game that is the bellwether, which is what makes San Francisco go. The zone running game, they run it inside with the zone, they run it outside with the zone. They play action against it. They play a lot of 21 personnel. They play a lot of 22 personnel. Kansas City will play a lot of 3 wide receivers. They'll play a lot of 11. Kansas City, a lot of 11. And Kansas City's staple is that they'll give you these 4 verticals. Andy Reid is the most, while Shanahan's handed down from father to son are about this zone blocking running game. And everything's off the running game. Andy Reid is the most pass-happy play caller in the history of the National Football League. Nobody passes the ball more. Everything they do is designed. Now, where Andy has modernized is he has utilized speed dramatically, and he will utilize it with his 4 verticals. He will also utilize it by making you cover them horizontally, cover them in the running game from sideline to sideline. Understand the run-pass options that they will give you with, now you hear all the time, the trendy RPO. The idea that they make you cover every blade of grass on the field. They will stretch you horizontally. They will stretch you vertically. They will go to this 4 vertical look, which is lethal. They will go to the 3 wides on one side and the tight end on the other side, which they like to utilize a lot. And then they will flop that with motion and then wind up with Hill and Kelsey on the same side. So they got a million different ways to get people open. And they have a quarterback who's incredibly talented and elusive. He is an incredible talent. There's no question about that. Mahomes has everything. He's got instincts. He's got touch. He's got great arm strength. He's got awareness. He's got the ability to break tackles. He's got an ability he has the ability to get outside the pocket and basically reset the play. So he gets away from, they collapse the pocket, he gets outside it. Now he starts to roll right. When he starts to roll right, that's the trigger to move. When they move, he now will wait, set, plant, and then he's got his guy. When he plants, he's got his next guy. So you have to stop them twice, not once. That's very hard to do. His ability to run is, in a big game like this, is a threat. He's got an arm where he can throw the ball 80 yards in the air, and he's got receivers who run like the wind. You have 2 offenses who, on paper, look unstoppable in the things they do. What scares you about it from the Kansas City standpoint is if San Francisco is efficient with what they do, then the Kansas City offense doesn't get on the field. That is the fear you have if you're Kansas City, is I don't want them to do what Indianapolis did. Indianapolis held them to 13 points. How? They never let them get the ball. They got 9 possessions in the game. 9 possessions. They ran 74 plays. They rushed for 180 yards. Kansas City ran 57 plays. Throw in a couple of field goals when they got in the red zone, and Kansas City had 1 touchdown in that game, and they scored first. The next game, the Texans ran 84 plays to Kansas City's 47 plays, and Kansas City lost 31-24. Mahomes lost 3 times this year. He scored first in all 3 games he lost, and in all 3 games, the opposing team ran for big yardage, and 2 of the 3, they kept the ball for almost 40 minutes. And they ran up big numbers on plays, and in neither game did Kansas City touch the ball 10 times. Kansas City needs possessions in this game. If you go in this game, the thing San Francisco wants to do more than anything else is limit the number of possessions that Kansas City has. Special teams, Kansas City's been very sloppy in the playoffs, and San Francisco has not been sloppy at all. Kansas City's been very slow starting. They made a million mistakes, and they've been very sloppy with penalties, very sloppy with special teams mistakes, but they have the better special teams. San Francisco got the better defense. They have the much better pass rush. Kansas City has one weak link on the offensive line, which they do a good job of covering up, and they're improved defensively over the last 6 weeks. Spags' defense has really taken hold, and they did a good job of stopping. The score did not stop Tennessee's ground game. Kansas City stopped it before the score stopped it. The score eventually stopped it because it eventually does. When you're up 35-17 and 6 minutes left, you got to pass the ball. But before that, they stopped them down after down after down. And Baltimore couldn't, and New England couldn't. But they did. They did by tackling very well in the secondary. They did by getting Chris Jones to play really well when he played. But they knew what downs to insert Chris Jones in that game because they knew what downs Tennessee was going to run on. They don't know that in this game. So if you like San Francisco in this game, I have no problem with it. They're better balanced. They have the better defense. If you're a guy who goes in and plays defense first, if you're a guy who says, I don't like the quarterback being the team being so quarterback reliant, I like the other team for that, then you go San Francisco. If you like the team that's better balanced, you like San Francisco. I've been on Kansas City all year. Like I said, I thought they could win the Super Bowl last year. They lost a heartbreaking game with D Ford being offside, which cost them a championship, even though they scored 31 points in the second half against New England, which is outrageous. Andy's team will move the ball here. Andy's team will be very well versed offensively. When he has 2 weeks, he is a master. When he had 2 weeks against New England in the Super Bowl, he moved the ball brilliantly. He just turned it over 4 times. And then we had the McNabb thing at the end of the game, which nobody understands. This game should be very close. If it's not, that would be the biggest upset of all, is that if one team blew the other one out, because they're very equal. They're both very good. I think we should get a game. Who knows? Maybe we'll get a game. Last person who touches it wins, which would be fun. I've been all week thinking that it's Andy's time. I hope it is. I hope I'm right. And I've been thinking that Mahomes has a little of that magic that he's going to spread all over Miami. So I think the Kansas City's going to win it. That would make Mahomes the MVP 9 out of 10, although I think Hill's going to have a big game. 33-27, something like that. I'll go Kansas City. I'm not getting off the Chiefs now. I've been on them all year. I've been on them every day since the season started. I'm not getting off them now. So Kansas City by 6. I'm not into whether it's high scoring, low scoring. I could care less. I just hope it's a good game. I hope it's fun to watch. And I hope in the end Kansas City wins it. And Andy's got a big old smile on his face as he finally gets to hoist that trophy, which will ensure that he is a first ballot Hall of Famer, which I think he has richly earned as a coach who's already won 207 games in a stellar career for 2 teams. So I hope that happens. Enjoy the game, everybody. We'll talk to you Monday early in the morning, and then, of course, 5 o'clock on radio.com, 6 o'clock on The Fan. So have a good weekend. It's a nice weekend for family and friends, and so enjoy that. Enjoy your Super Sunday, and we'll talk to you all on Monday. Have fun.